So welcome everyone to part 2 of our Countdown Digital Engagement Virtual Training Series. This session is on PowerPoint. Our first session, if you were able to attend, was on blogging. And our third session, which will be in 2 weeks from now, is on social media and specifically Twitter. But today we'll be covering PowerPoint. And as you're joining, please feel free to continue introducing yourself in the chat box and sharing your name, your organization, and what you do, what you like to do to take care of yourself while working remotely. So next slide. We are going to, or previous slide, yeah. We're going to launch our first poll of the day just to get a good idea of what your experience with PowerPoint is. You can vote for multiple responses if you'd like. And so we'll give you a few seconds to vote for that. And as we'll talk about in a moment, this webinar will help take you beyond the basics of PowerPoint and put its use in a wider context of digital engagement. We want you to get excited about presenting information in a way that's impactful and easy to understand, and to understand the full capabilities of PowerPoint to begin with as a tool for digital engagement and research utilization. I'll give you a few more seconds to vote. Great, and I'm going to share the results really quickly. Looks like we've got a great mix of experience here today, which is great. We have a lot of interactive activities to do today, so it'll be helpful to have this breadth of knowledge. Next slide. Now, if you weren't with us yesterday, or not yesterday, 2 weeks ago for the blogging session, we'll reintroduce ourselves quickly. I am Aubrey Weber, a technical officer in the Research Utilization Department at FHI 360. And with me today is Tori Lebrun, a research associate in the Health Services Research Division at FHI 360 as well. Next slide. So if you're new to this training, welcome again. This is a 3-part series offered by the Countdown on NTDs project that's designed to help researchers better understand and use online tools for communicating about your work. This series is especially timely as we've all had to adapt to changing demands and a new normal in the light of COVID-19. We're all doing more in the virtual space to move our work forward while we can't meet and collaborate in person. This series is designed to provide you with tips and inspiration to improve your online communication related to research uptake. And the next slide is our learning objectives for today's session specifically. So you may be asking yourself, why are we devoting an entire session in our digital engagement training series to PowerPoint? The simple answer is that PowerPoint is one of the most widely used tools for research uptake. I think we're all very well aware of that. It's used to create many of the materials that we share on digital platforms through social media, project websites, and email. Of course, it's also globally used, more than any other platform, I might add, for in-person and virtual presentations. We're using PowerPoint today for our training in Zoom right now. Today, we want to help you better understand the various uses of PowerPoint, learn best practices, and practice making visually appealing, impactful slide decks. We won't have time to demonstrate and practice everything you can do in PowerPoint. There is a breadth of information out there, and it does take some practice to design great slides, but we will teach you some of the most useful tips and tricks, and we'll provide resources at the end for further learning. Next slide. We're going to launch a second poll. Give me 1 second as I pull that up. And the question is, how confident are you in your ability to use PowerPoint effectively? 10 being that you're an expert when it comes to PowerPoint, you use it perfectly, you know you use it perfectly, you're very confident in your abilities. And one being that you're brand new to PowerPoint, not sure what the best practices are, that kind of thing. So we'll give you about 15 more seconds to vote. All right, I'll share the results quickly. So it looks like most people voted around the 7 range, but it looks like we're all fairly confident in our abilities. So hopefully a lot of this material reiterates what you already know, but also I hope you can learn some new things as well. Next slide. So PowerPoint is a multifaceted tool, meaning it has many uses and applications. The producer of PowerPoint, which is Microsoft, says that PowerPoint should be used for telling better stories. Let that sink in for a second. We often don't think of PowerPoint as a tool for telling stories. At least I don't, but it is. Whether we're using it to present information, conduct a training like this one, or design infographics or multimedia projects, we are in fact telling a story. As I mentioned, PowerPoint is the most popular presentation software globally, which should come as no surprise. It's used everywhere, and especially in our work. Next slide. And I'm gonna hand it over to Tori for now.
Thanks, Aubrey. So these are a few examples of how we typically use PowerPoint in global health and research. And some of these you're probably very familiar with, like the poster on the right side. Others you may not have, others are formats you may not have used yet, like on the left side, we have a use of PowerPoint for a report. So I wanted to show that PowerPoint's very versatile. It can be used in different ways, and we're not going to have time to cover these different types of products that you can create with PowerPoint, but you should know that PowerPoint is really probably the most popular tool for designing knowledge products because it's really good for design. The product in the middle is a policy brief, and Countdown uses PowerPoint for its policy brief formats as well. Okay, next slide. So PowerPoint can be used throughout the research cycle and is really important for research uptake. We use it to present research ideas during the development phase. We use it for ongoing research and research that's being completed to share results. We use it during technical working group meetings, and we use it for trainings as well. Some of these different uses may have slides that are different from what we're going to be talking about today. Today we're really going to be focusing on developing slides that are high impact and don't contain a lot of information condensed into a slide. But when you're doing something like creating a PowerPoint slide deck for a training, sometimes you can have slides that are very text heavy. So typically though, PowerPoint is used to create visual representations of your research and the points that you're trying to make, and the information should be very easy to digest so that somebody can look at that slide and understand what the main point is right away. Next slide.
So we're going to do a little annotation. If you were with us last time, we had this slide up and you'll recognize it. This is just kind of to teach you where the annotation feature is. You'll see view options at the top of your screen, and you'll be able to click annotation. So using that on the next slide, we'd like you to annotate somewhere in between these two photos, just words that come to mind when you're thinking of what you want your audience to feel like when you're presenting your PowerPoint to them. Obviously think of positive words and add them onto the screen. The images here are supposed to be inspiration for those words. And I might add that for the annotation, you should be choosing the text feature, and then you'll be able to type onto the screen. And if you have trouble with this, then feel free to add your words to the chat box. Informed, I like that one a lot. You want your audience to be informed. Relaxed, that's a good one too. Not one we often think about, but you don't want them to feel stressed by your slide deck. Interested, we got that one twice, and also captivated along the same lines. You want to hold their interest. Engaged, I like these a lot. Yes, you want your audience to want to hear more. You want them to be attentive. Excellent. These are great ideas. Yes, so the images here are supposed to, you guys hit it on the head. You're supposed to make your audience feel inspired, informed, empowered, engaged, inquisitive, interested in what you're presenting, not confused or anything like that, but these are all great examples. So next slide.
So unfortunately, a lot of times PowerPoint slides can make people feel confused, frustrated, or even bored if they feel like the information is not easy to understand or digest. And I loved your some of your examples there when people said they want their audience to be anticipating what comes next. That's a good one. When we're in the middle of a long slide deck or a long presentation, PowerPoint can be used strategically to keep the audience engaged and to prevent frustration and boredom by really helping people to think through the issues that we're talking about and the facts that we're presenting, doing it in a way that's engaging. Another key thing here is that common problems when people feel lost or might be that they don't know where you are in the presentation. So orienting them throughout your presentation is important. And sometimes people have trouble keeping up with the slides if they have a lot written on them particularly. So we'll learn how to avoid some of these problems. Next slide.
We're going to launch a third poll here just to ask you, what is your relationship with PowerPoint? How do you feel about using PowerPoint? For this one, you can only vote once. So we'll give you about 30 seconds to vote here. About 10 more seconds to vote. Excellent. Okay, I'll share these quickly. A lot of people said we're either a match made in heaven or it's complicated. I use PowerPoint, but it isn't always easy. I'm in that boat myself. It isn't always easy to think about design and what to put on your slides in terms of content. So I definitely understand that. Looks like we're across the board again. So this is great to see. Hopefully we will improve your ideas, your relationship with PowerPoint by the end of this. So next slide.
Okay. So for those of you who said that sometimes it can be difficult to design things in PowerPoint, and for those of you who feel fairly comfortable with PowerPoint but really want to be able to design things more and customize things more, we're going to have a quick tutorial now. So I am going to demonstrate some functions of PowerPoint that I think are particularly impactful and will really help to take a basic slide and make it even better. So I'm going to share my screen now and do a little tutorial. Okay. Can everyone see my screen that says PowerPoint Magic? I'm not sure. Oh, wait, there we go. that should do it.
There we go.
Okay, so if I'm not looking in the right place, sorry, I have another monitor up here. I am going to demonstrate some high impact PowerPoint features. The first thing I want to show you is where some of the tools are in PowerPoint. Most of the things I'm going to be showing you are either on the Home tab in your ribbon or on this Insert tab here. So we often use Smart Art for diagrams and visuals, charts and graphs as well. But I also want to show you how to create your own things using shapes and how to align and group things, which I think is really, really useful. Alignment is going to be here in the Home tab, and these are all under the Arrange thing here. So first I'm going to just create a shape, and there's a vast array of shapes here to choose from, so you can play around with those. I'm gonna go with a little box with rounded corners, and let's go back to the Home tab. So we'll use this Arrange tool, but first I'm just going to multiply this a few times and show you what we can do with it. So I have created a bunch of boxes, and you should see the little red dotted lines that show up. Those help you to put things on the same, to make things parallel, all on the same line. And that can be very useful as well. But right now I'm going to show you how you can group things by drawing a box around them. And you can select all of them and make them a group, and then they will move together, which is really useful as well. But I'm going to use the Arrange tool to align these and distribute them horizontally. Whoops. I think I have to ungroup them before I do that. So what happens now is that they're all distributed horizontally, but now I want them all to be in the same line. So I'm going to align them to the top one, and they all jump into a line. You should definitely play around with that tool if you're not familiar with it. You can use that to put your boxes in lines and rows, or any shape that you're using. And then you can use this to create diagrams. It's really useful for things like logic models, timelines, stakeholder diagrams, anything that shows process and flow charts. I also want to just acknowledge that I know it can be hard to learn these things when somebody else is going through them. I really encourage people to look at the recording of this afterward and use these tools and practice them. I am going to have to move a little quickly due to time constraints. So that is how you can align things. Next, I'm going to show you how you can take some smart art and customize it. We are often very familiar with smart art, but may not know how to use it with some of these tools. So if I want to show a process, for example, like, let's say I want to show a data collection process. I've just created a smart art by choosing one of the predetermined options, and I'm going to put in some of the steps in data collection. So training. This is just a typical sort of slide you might create for like a data collector training. Field work. And let's say you're doing qualitative data collection. So you have transcription and translation after the data are collected. Now, smart art doesn't always do exactly what we want it to do. So it looks okay, but I think I want this arrow to be sort of longer. And I can drag that independently of the boxes and resize it. So smart art is really useful when there are options that sort of fit with what we're looking for. And if it's not meeting your needs, then you can create your own graphics. And these are icons, which is also a really useful thing that PowerPoint has now. So if I wanted to add and show that within the fieldwork step, people are going to be going into the field and collecting data from facilities and providers, I can use icons to show that and maybe have an arrow coming down from field work that shows that at this step, you're going to be collecting data, and you can add, boxes to explain that. And then you can add, you can also customize this with colors. And I wanted to show you that you can go to the design tab and you can choose a color palette. And I have created color palettes for countdown colors, which should be in the countdown template, and I'll make sure that they are in the template that gets sent out to you. So here you can select your colors, and I have countdown colors. That one's too green, but a countdown color palette. And so now all of the colors that are on my like predetermined color choices will be countdown colors. Like in the design, they should be, so these are orange still, but change colors here. So now these are all countdown colors. Sorry if this is fast, but I'm realizing that it might be hard to see everything that I'm clicking, but I do want to be able to show some of these things, and you can go back. So the last thing is graphics. And with the icons, these people can be really useful for creating any kind of infographic. If you want to show, for example, opinions and say, 5 out of 10 people, well, you would probably do like 1 out of 5 people, or 2 out of 2 out of 7 people say this. So you can use the icons. There's a man and a woman icon, and use that to create those types of graphics by, again, just copying and pasting and using the alignment tool like this. Distribute, and then I'm going to align them to the top. And so then you can take one and make it a different color if you wanted to say, you know, 1 out of 4. Like that. So I hope those were helpful. And for those of you who are familiar with some of the basics, maybe this will help you to take it to the next level. Thanks.
And Tori, while Sarah's resharing the slide deck, Alar had a question in the chat box. When I insert smart art, I usually don't see the text horizontally at the left side to type into. Maybe I'm not pressing something correctly. Do you have an answer for that?
The smart art is usually organized with a bullet point outline that appears to the left side. And that is sort of like a menu that can be collapsed. So there is a way to expand it and see that. And I think that that box, there's a little arrow. It's a little tiny arrow that can be used to expand that box. I can send out a picture of that after presentation. So moving on to this example here, this is an example of graphics. I really wanted to spend a minute here talking about how to make your graphs and charts easily understandable and just easy to digest. So some of the problems that I see occasionally are the use of a bar chart when a pie chart would be easier to read, or vice versa. So this example here is an example of some data about clients in a health system. It's just a generic graphic here, but this is an example that came out of a project I was working on. And the slide has been designed, or the bar chart has been designed to show different categories of clients, but you'll notice the first 4 bars are age groups, and those 4 bars together show the entire population. But then you have 2 more bars on the right that show new clients and men. So those categories are really separate from the age groups. And there is also a box showing that 59% of the clients are young people when you group these 3 bars. And when I look at a graphic like this, I think that's not very intuitive. And so it needed to be called out in a box to be able to even see that those bars are the majority of the clients. So in order to make that clearer, you could group those bars into 1 bar, or if you want to show the different age groups since you have that data, you can create a pie chart. So next slide. Next slide. Good. Okay, so here, this is the same data, and to make that slide more easy to understand and just nicer visually, I've taken all of the data that are by age and made that into a pie chart. So you can see that now here, this is the whole population, the whole study population. And the 3 age groups that are under 30 are grouped together, separate from the over 30 group. So you can very easily see visually without having to do any further interpretation that that is the majority of the population. And then I've separated out the other two statistics that were there, or the other two groups. So now you can see that separately, that new clients make up a little over 10%, and male clients make up 9% of the population. And I've also applied the countdown color scheme. So this now just looks a lot cleaner and is easier to visually see the main point that is being conveyed. Next slide.
Thanks, Tori. So we're going to go through quickly some very high level do's and don'ts of PowerPoint. We can go to the next slide. So one important do is to clearly state the topic to your audience, the topic of what you're presenting, and or begin with an outline. A don't would be to jump into your presentation without first sharing some context. So it's important to orient your audience to the content you are presenting, especially when you're presenting research. Start by explaining your research question, what you set out to find, and consider adding a brief agenda so your audience knows what to expect from what you're about to present. Next slide. Another do is to use bullet points and summarize, and a don't is to do not include paragraphs of information or write out every word you intend to share. This may seem like a given, but one of the more commonly made don'ts is a slide deck that's full of words. When you're presenting, focus on summarizing your more lengthy topic points in your actual slides. You absolutely do not need to write out every word you intend to read or share. Your slide should be a visual reference for your audience, but you want them to be focused on what you're saying and what you're adding to the slide. You do not want them to feel overwhelmed with reading material. A quick note on bullet points. Typically, you'll use a formatted slide deck, perhaps one from Countdown or your organization. But when you're designing slides from scratch, try to use a font size of 24 points or larger. If the text is too much for the slide, take that as a sign to potentially reduce or break it up into multiple slides. Next slide. Another do is you should use your slides to highlight what is most important and offer high-level information. And a don't is to not assume that your audience has a photographic memory. This is a great don't to highlight. People will likely not remember everything you said, but they will remember the high-level points you made, especially if they're properly emphasized. The next do is to take time to design and edit your slides and include images and graphics throughout your presentation. A corresponding don't is to not experiment with hard to read fonts or styles, and don't crowd your slides. The goal here is to design a visually engaging slide deck, but at the same time, keep in mind that less is more. Less text with a single supplemental photo or graphic and ample white space is most visually appealing, most easy to digest for an audience member, and it will help them retain the information you are presenting better. Next slide. Another do is to keep data visuals as simple as possible. Ask a colleague to review them. And a corresponding don't is to share a complicated visual that will likely confuse your audience. So in the do column, why do we add asking a colleague to review a data visual or graph? This is a good way to just check to see if the message you're sharing and the data you're presenting is translating how you want it to. Is the point I'm trying to make with this graph clear and understandable? If your colleague says yes, you're likely good to go. If they're confused by the data presented, though, you can bet that your audience will also find it confusing. Next slide. Another do is to break up longer presentations into sections and orient your audience to the material. And you should not overdo it or assume your audience has an unlimited attention span. Sometimes, especially when presenting research, there is a lot of information that must be included in your PowerPoint. When this is the case, don't fret. Find natural breaks in the content you are presenting and break up different points onto different slides. It is usually a better idea to have more slides with less information on each than fewer slides that are overly crowded and not easy to grasp. Seventh do is to use hyperlinks to cite your sources and add appropriate credit to images that you're using. And you should not plagiarize or forget to cite your sources. Remember, in PowerPoint, a hyperlink to a source will do. There's really no need to then add a reference later on if you have a hyperlink. If no link exists, feel free to add a reference slide at the end of your presentation though. A special note here, if you do not intend to share your slides after your presentation, hyperlinks won't be very useful to your audience. They simply won't be able to access them without your slide deck. So consider instead sending out a list of resources after your presentation. The main takeaway here is that you must cite your sources though, whether it's information or an image. And the final do is to prepare your remarks. Plan to say more than what is on your slides and practice. And don't read directly from your slides in most cases. The final do and don't. Think about this from the audience's point of view. If you read directly from your slides and offer little or no additional information, you could have just as easily sent your PowerPoint as an email attachment. Your slides should be a visual representation of the high-low points you're presenting, not your actual or full presentation. Utilize your deck as a guide for your presentation rather than a carbon copy of your presentation. Next slide. So here's just one example of a slide that hits pretty much all of the major do's of PowerPoint. It's not particularly exciting, but it does things pretty well. It's formatted in a conference template. The font is consistent and readable. The bullet points are simple and easy to understand, and they are brief, so they are serving the purpose of guiding a more detailed verbal presentation. The topic of the slide is supplemented with an image and a simple reference link. And additionally, there is a good amount of white space. The slide is not busy. When you look at this slide, you're likely not feeling overwhelmed or frustrated or bored. You're likely feeling more so like this is information you can grasp once the presenter shares more information verbally. I know that was a lot, but now we're going to go into a quick annotation quiz. So next slide, we have 3 questions for you. So using the stamps function, and again, going up to annotation and view options, and then click stamps instead of text. We want you to vote with your virtual feet, meaning in in-person trainings, you typically would walk to one side of the room or another to vote if something is true or false. So here we want you to use the stamps to put it somewhere on along this line here. True being on the left side, entirely true being on the left side, entirely false being on the right side, and then feel free to add in the middle. The statement is, I should never read directly from my PowerPoint slides. So feel free to use the stamps to vote. If you have trouble using the stamps, feel free to add your answer to the chat box. I like the variety of stamps being used. This is great. Wonderful. Yes, so the answer is mostly true, and we've kind of said that up until this point. There are cases where you might need to read directly from your slides. You know, if you're reading a quote or just the information is like really important to be sharing, maybe a tagline from a funder or something like that that needs to be shared. So this answer is mostly true, but there are those few exceptions. Next slide. Tori, would you like to take this one?
Sure. So again, we'll do the same type of a quiz, and the question is, or the statement is, I should use pictures, graphics, and animation as much as possible without limits in my PowerPoint. So it looks like we're getting a little bit of a range of answers, and several people say that this is true. Actually, I would say this statement is more on the false side. We think that in order to keep your slides clean and to convey information in a way that doesn't confuse people but conveys one point at a time in a simple manner, it's usually best to have pictures and graphics of your slides, but to keep them limited so that any individual slide does not have too much information or multiple graphics. There are some cases where you'll need multiple graphics on a slide, but in general, you should exercise restraint when you're inserting pictures and graphics. And as for animation, if you use the PowerPoint animation feature, it can be very good for having your points appear one by one if you have a list of points. And that's probably the best use of it. There are some other cases where it can be useful to have something appear on your screen, but using a lot of animation can be distracting to your audience, particularly slide transitions, having one slide sort of roll into the next one. Those can be distracting, and we don't recommend using them. Next slide.
So we've got one more question here for you, or statement to vote on. My research presentation should include all of the details from my research paper. Is it true or false? All right, yeah, so mostly false. This one might seem a little bit confusing, although it seems like you all got it. But one of the many reasons we present research in the form of a PowerPoint is to offer that high-level must-know information. While unfortunate, it is unlikely that many people will take the time to read your entire research paper. But you can offer a summarized version of the highlights in your PowerPoint, thus providing your audience with the key takeaways in an easy-to-digest manner. One point I'd like to add here is that as a speaker, you should rarely find yourself saying something like, I know all of the details are too small to read for those of you in the back, unless it's just an illustration of a document with words no one is actually supposed to read. Just give an idea of what the document or chart or database looks like, but don't put the entire body of information on your slide, as it's pretty much just a distraction. So next slide, I'll pass it back to Tori.
Okay, our next and final portion of this presentation is going to be going through some examples. And these are examples that suffer from some of the common problems with PowerPoint. And we are going to look at them and decide how we could improve these slides. So we're calling them fail to fab. We're going to take some slides that are problematic and make them better. Next slide. So as I said, we'll go through these examples and ask ourselves, why is the slide a failed example and how could you make it a fab example? So everyone, when we go through, unmute your mic and tell us what your ideas are for improving the slide, or you can also write it in the chat box. Next slide. Here's our first example of a bar chart. How would you improve this slide? Add color. That's a good point. There's a lot of bars here. Are some of them different from others? Maybe you could use color to indicate that. I see some people are using annotations, and there's some up near the top. Maybe that indicates that we should look at the title I do think that this title could be a lot more informative, and your title should usually make your main point for you, and tell the audience what the key idea is. Add a key, that's a very good point as well. Add a key to orient your audience and tell them what this data are. Categorize the countries into regions. That could be helpful if that's the way you want your audience to be looking at the data. These are great responses. Someone also said reduce the range. Yeah, see if any of these bars can be eliminated from the slide if they are not the key data you want to highlight. I would also say the y-axis here could be reformatted. You don't need all those decimal points with your percents, and you may be able to reduce it so you don't have as many percentages over there. Let's move on to the next slide. So this is an example of a slide that I created. It's not anyone's slide from a presentation, but it suffers from some of the common problems when people are trying to use PowerPoint. So how would you improve this slide? You can't read it. Remove the background image, someone says. It is crowded, reduce the text. Absolutely, those are great examples. Someone says, ouch, this slide hurts my eyes. The white text is hard to read. Yes, so definitely cut down the words. Lots of people are saying that. These points could be bullets. Some of them could be separate slides. If you're trying to present background information about a topic, which is what this slide does, you can usually have that on 1 or 2 slides, just using some bullets, and really try to keep your bullets short. The background image is pretty, and it shows a lake, which is related to the topic, but it makes the text hard to read. If you do have text on top of an image, usually the text should be very large and very clear, and the image should be somewhat darker so that the text is still easy to read. Okay, next slide. Here's an example of a generic type of slide about a company, what sets our company apart, and there are some points here. Someone has also commented you could use smart art to present the introduction. In some cases, yeah, you could use smart art if you have a few bullets, for maybe up to 4 or 5. You could use smart art. Some of them lend themselves to a few bullet points. So this slide, example C, is too wordy. It presents important information, and a lot of the blue text would be great talking points to discuss while you're on the slide. But it has main points, sub-points. It actually has 3 levels in it. That makes it very busy, and a lot of information to digest if someone's trying to look at this slide and read it quickly as you're going through your presentation. And here, with this type of slide, the people are often just struggling to keep up and to decide whether they should be reading or listening to the presenter. So you really shouldn't have that conflict going on in your head when you're in a presentation of should I read or should I listen. Let's move on to the next slide. So here, I think this one has some obvious flaws, and I'm just going to go through them in the interest of time. It hasn't been spell checked, and it's using some crazy fonts, which are, you know, they could be kind of fun, but they really don't belong in a professional presentation because they're difficult to read, and having more than one font on a slide is visually distracting and can be difficult for the audience to read and digest the information. And the use of different colors in the middle of your text is also very distracting. Next slide. So some tips for presenting your slides. When you're going through, and there's a lot of information available online about presenting as well, but we're just going to quickly cover some of the main points to keep in mind. Definitely speak slowly and clearly. Use voice variation so that you don't sound like a robot. Try to speak naturally, really, and that shouldn't be hard if you've practiced. Don't read exactly what's on your slides. It's okay to read some of the points that are on your slides, but you should be elaborating on them. And usually spend no more than 1 to 2 minutes on each slide, maybe with the exception of a results slide that's showing your key results from your research. There are some slides like that you may spend more time on, but typically you don't spend very long on each one. Make acknowledgments and include appropriate logos always. And for photographs, not only should you acknowledge the person who took the photograph or where you got it from, if it is a stock photograph, but you need to make sure that if someone took a picture of beneficiaries or participants in research, that everyone in that photo has given their consent for the photo to be used. If they haven't provided consent and you don't have a consent form, you can't really use that photo. The last point is the most important one. Just practice. The PowerPoint actually has features where you can practice and time yourself presenting. You can record yourself presenting and listen to it so that you can learn from your mistakes. So take advantage of those features. Next slide. So we just have a couple minutes left. Go ahead, Aubrey.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I've been monitoring the chat box, and I think we've answered the questions that have come in from there. But feel free to stay on after these last few slides in case you have questions. I'm adding our quick survey to the chat box right now. This is the same survey if you were here for the last session. It's the same survey, but for this session, we would love everyone who was here today to take it. It's got like 6 questions. A lot of them are yes, no's. So shouldn't take you more than a minute to complete, and we really appreciate the feedback. Next slide. Just go through these last few slides, and then again, if you have questions, feel free to stay on for a few minutes. So we have additional resources here. There's only a few, but there are tons of things out there to help with just basics for PowerPoint. And as Tori went over in the beginning, feel free to rewatch this because we will share the recording and the slide deck just to get a better grasp on some of those features. Next slide. These are our emails and our Twitter handles. So follow us and ask us questions. Feel free to ask via email if we can't get to it today. Next slide. We're going to launch our final poll of the day, which is the same poll as the second poll today. We want to see if you feel a little bit more confident today or not. So please vote before you leave. Give you about 15 more minutes to vote. Or not minutes, seconds. Seconds. All right, looks like most people voted. I'll share the results. So now most people are saying 8 with a few 9s and 10s. So I think that's really great to see. Hopefully this was really helpful for you. We can go to the final slide too. You know, we have like 1 minute remaining. So just up next, again, check the chat box right now. There's the link to our survey. Please do complete this. We love everyone who's here today to complete it. A recording of this session as a reminder, along with a copy of the slide deck, will be shared later this week. And don't miss our 3rd and final session in the series on Twitter, which will be on July 7th at the same time, and it should be on everyone's calendars already. With that, if you'd like to stay on to ask a question, feel free, but otherwise, have a great rest of your day, and thank you for joining.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. I'll stay on for a minute, but in case there are questions, just please take the survey. We would love to hear your feedback, and we are listening to you and trying to make these sessions really tailored for what people want.
Hi, Tori. Hi, Aubrey.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, my name is Lurat from Nigeria, and I just wanted to clarify. I discovered a new, another way of creating smart art by actually typing in the bullet points into a PowerPoint slide, right-clicking, and then converting it to the specific smart art I would want. But I realized that if I do it that way, it doesn't, like, for example, if I want to show a continuum with one arrow, it's like, it's broken down into smaller pieces. I don't know how to explain it better than what I've said. So I'm just wondering if there's a way around it, if you understand my question.
Yes, Lorette, that is wonderful. It's great to hear from you too. I remember you from the last meeting that I went to a long, couple years ago, but
Yeah.
But thanks for joining today. And kudos to you for figuring out how to do that. That is a great PowerPoint shortcut to be able to type your bullet points and then convert them to smart art. Yeah. I think that you probably need to rearrange the bullets in the text in the smart art, and it's probably too difficult to talk through it without having it up on PowerPoint, but I would be happy to go through that with you separately. Okay. We could set up a time to talk and go through it.
Okay, thank you very much, Tori. I will set up a time, and if it's at your own convenience, then we can do it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Excellent. So if there are no more questions, we'll end the session, but feel free to follow up with us and look out for an email in the next few days with a link, a YouTube link to this presentation, as well as the PowerPoint itself. And again, please take that survey. The link is in the chat box, but we'll reshare that link as well in the follow-up email. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.